Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. Thank you all for coming to our next session of the HMA training series. Today's session will be developing an application, and we have our great team here from Witt O'Brien today to facilitate the training. And I'm going to now hand it over to, and also introduction of myself, Hal O'Brien. I'm the Hazard Mitigation Specialist for the Nevada Division of Emergency Management. And we also have Janelle Woodward on with us today also, who is the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. And now I'd like to hand it over to Chelsea to start the training.
Thank you, Hal. I appreciate that. Today's presentation is going to be dry material presented in a very nerdy way. As I think, as all of you know now, Chelsea Morganti, Director of Hazard Mitigation here at Witt O'Brien's, and I'm assisting the state of Nevada in these training sessions. So be prepared to be for the nerdy joy that will come with this application training. So today we're going to go through, for each of you who is considering submitting an application for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program post-fire, or for any of the other mitigation grants that we've discussed so far, we're going to go through the components of what that homework is going to look like. What are you going to need to do to get across the finish line and to get that application out the door for the funding? So we're going to start with the key components. I like to call these the bones because no matter which grant program you decide to pursue, you're going to need these elements no matter what. So the bones of every application is going to include your scope of work, your project schedule, your cost estimate, that detailed budget, and all of the backup supporting documentation. There are some mandatory federal forms, and then there are some supporting elements as well. So all of these pieces, they're going to be the same no matter what. And then just think about like the sprinklings of flavorings on top, depending on which grant program you're going after, that might change just a little bit of that flavor. But again, these are the bones. This is what you need. And then over the top, connecting all things, is the narrative. There's a narrative that's going to tie, it's the story that ties all of your bones together into a delicious meal. All right, and as you can tell, your application is going to be a little bit bulky. There's a lot of components that go into this, and they all have to align together into a nice, clean, giant application stack for FEMA. First things first, when you're getting started on your, and actually I can hear him. Is anyone trying to speak? I hear somebody. Does somebody have? Okay.
I'm not seeing that, Chelsea.
Okay, there was somebody who was, I think, had their own, like a television. Thank you, Erin.
Just didn't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Appreciate it. Okay. So first things first, starts with technical feasibility and effectiveness. So we want to make sure that we are in alignment with that HMA guidance and that your project is a good project for what you're trying to do. So it needs to mitigate the hazard that you've identified, and it needs to be possible, achievable, attainable. So feasibility and effectiveness, that's the first thing that you want to make sure that you're proving to FEMA that your application can meet those criteria. Another sort of through line that I want to sort of highlight here at the beginning is that your scope of work, your budget, and your schedule all need to be in alignment. We do not like dangling threads. We do not like missing pennies. Any of those kinds of elements are going to cause FEMA to like kind of scratch their chin. Don't ever want to have anything that's like outside peripheral. So it is most clean if you can identify the specific tasks that are associated with your scope of work. You have those aligned with how long it's going to take to accomplish that task. And then there's a dollar figure associated with the accomplishing of that task, and whatever that looks like together. And then it gets broken down to 75-25. Every element that you put into your application has to meet HMA eligibility criteria. So everything in your world is eligible. And like we talked about last week, wherever you carve out that 75-25, what's reimbursable, what's match, doesn't matter. All of everything in your bucket needs to meet eligibility requirements. Okay, so let's talk about writing your application. How do you do this? How do you write an application for hazard mitigation funding? Well, guess what? You've all done this before. It might be a long time since you were in, maybe elementary school and had to write a story that clearly outlined your who, what, when, where, why, and how. This is going back to the beginnings here, but these same elements apply. When you are telling your story to FEMA, it is important to convey not just the technical information that you're trying to convey, meeting your eligibility, checking all of your FEMA checkboxes, but you also need to do a good job of telling your story and writing a convincing narrative for why this is an important process. So first, the who, what, when, where, why, how. So who lives in your community? Who is impacted by this hazard? Who uses the services that are impacted? Are you losing a road? Are you losing power? Are you losing a bridge? What a facility of some kind, a police station, a fire station? Who is impacted? Who uses that service? And what vulnerable communities are at risk? So as a reminder, particularly if you're going after any of those national grant programs that are not yet open but are on their way, you want to make sure that you are identifying your economically disadvantaged rural community, your social vulnerability index high scoring community, your national risk index, your CDC, that's the social vulnerability index right there, or your CGEST community. So these are the links to help you identify if the populations that are directly impacted by the hazard that you're mitigating meet some of those federally identified CEDAR zones, anything like that is going to identify for FEMA that your wants, needs, and desires are aligned with FEMA's wants, needs, and desires. So who, even if the community that you're identifying, that you're protecting with your project is not one of those federally prioritized communities, you should still be painting the picture for FEMA of the who that you're trying to protect. If that who includes an elderly population, if that who includes, we're doing a project in city center that protects, the heart of our community, who is that? Who are those people that are there? All of those who's, make sure that that is included in your narrative. What? Who, what? There are two aspects to the what. What is the hazard and what did it do? And what are you going to do about it? So there's two different aspects to the what. When you are outlining what happened or what will happen, because sometimes you're talking about your projected, your professional expected damages or your expectations, your model damages for what you think the bad day is going to look like, that is a valid thing to say. We haven't had the bad day yet, but we know that it's going to come, and here's our proof for what we think is going to happen. But also, a lot of people are applying for mitigation funding because of what has happened. So when you're talking about what happened, FEMA is not going, people who are reading your application, who live in wildly different locations, very disconnected from your community, are not going to understand how bad that day was for you and what was at risk and what went horribly wrong and why was that impactful, or what could have gone more wrong and how you were able to sort of, get around that very bad thing from happening. So you need to paint the picture of why this application is necessary because of what could go wrong. So you need to describe the bad things, you need to describe the important stuff that is at risk, and you need to describe what will happen if you don't have the project in place. If you have photos, if you have maps, if you have documentation of any kind, please make sure that your information is supported here. You're painting the picture for FEMA and you're tying it all together. Then we're going to talk about what will happen. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, your scope of work. What are you going to do with this money? What is your plan? What is your solution? How is it going to work? Where does it meet the HMA eligibility criteria? Like what project type have you selected? Again, if you have any photos, maps, drawings, quotes, anything else, a comprehensive plan, hazard mitigation plan, anything that supports the scope for why you think that this project is a good idea and what it includes, we want to make sure that goes in there as well. And again, as a reminder, this scope of work should have those discrete tasks, those steps. It's the stepping stones that get you down the path to completion of your goal. So your tasks should be like the bite-sized chunks that you can complete. It is perfectly acceptable for your tasks to overlap. Yeah, I like to use the hazard mitigation plan as a good example because it's pretty, everybody's got to do it. So you can have tasks that start and stop. You can have tasks that go throughout the entirety of the project, like project management. You're going to have that throughout the whole thing. It's okay for it to be a task that spans the whole piece, but that needs to be sort of contained so you can assign a schedule to it. Other things like procuring a contractor or completing an assessment or completing construction, all of those are going to have a definitive start and stop. So that's a task, and that's the task that you can assign a time value to in your schedule. So that is the what will happen. Who, what, oh wait, there's one more piece I want to say. When you are including in your scope of work, like I mentioned, make sure that what you're including in your full spectrum meets the HMA eligibility criteria. You can go back, check your documentation, check this hazard mitigation assistance program and policy guide, and make sure that everything that you're putting in your scope of work is going to be eligible. And of course, always ask questions. I've said this before. I would rather answer a 30-second question that you might feel is like a dumb question than you have to spend 2 hours trying to research something that's never going to be important to you again. So please do. Emails are great. Phone calls are great. If you have a dumb question, I love dumb questions because I feel like they lead to the best, most interesting conversations. So feel free to jump in at any time on these training sessions too if you want to chat, or we can stick around after and do a little Q&A. But we're happy to answer any questions that you have about eligibility. If we can answer any little triage questions and get you through closer on your way to actually getting an application out the door, all of that's great. All right, who, what, when? This is your schedule. Reminder, your schedule. You need to align the scope of work tasks with your timeline. Be practical about how long it will take. If you think in your head, oh, I could get that done in 2 weeks, that'd be great. But, oh yeah, you've got to go to the board, or you've got to go pass a financial check, or you've got, okay, you will take 2 weeks, but then that other person's going to have to review it for 2 weeks. And then that other person's going to have to review it for 2 weeks. And then it's going to have to go back over there for 2 weeks. Be practical about how long these things take. There is a 36-month period of performance. You don't get any extra points if you finish it in 16 months, but you will have to report if you said you were going to do it in 16 months and it actually took you 28. So be practical, and also include in your schedule the amount of time it takes everybody to look at your paperwork, because these are very dense applications. There is a review time up front for the state and FEMA to go through your awards, to go through all your documentation, make that award. And then there's review times throughout for procurement, for when you submit invoicing and things. If you're doing a phased application, there's a review time in the middle between when you finish and FEMA gives you that second half of the funding. And then closeout. Closeout always needs like a good chunk of time there at the end to make sure everybody's got all their paperwork cleaned up and ready to go at the very end. So when? Where is here anyway? This might feel like an easily skippable one for you because, of course, you're in the state of Nevada and everybody in Nevada knows where you are. But particularly when you go over for those national competition grants or that BRIC or FMA grant programs, You're getting a reviewer from an entirely different background from across the country who might not understand the nuances of where you are. So it is important to identify your location. Just give a little narrative. It doesn't have to be like your entire Wikipedia page, but just like a quick little rundown. We are a community nestled between mountains and river, in a little strip of land. We are a community in the high desert, that face wildfire danger due our brush fires. Whatever is particular to your area, making sure that you identify where that location is and where the project location is in relation to where you are. Your important stuff location. So if you're doing a project to protect a facility, you want to make sure you're identifying where the project is, where the facility is, and how that protection is being provided. Maps are great. Pictures are great. Anything that you have, you're going to need to, particularly if you have multiple sites, include the latitude and longitude of every critical facility or every project site that you're going to have. So latitude and longitude, you can find it on Google Maps. It feels, if you've never done that before, maybe a little bit more foreign, but there's a really easy way to find that on Google Maps. And then you can screenshot Google Maps. You can even sometimes do like the road view of Google Maps. But honestly, driving the project site is probably going to be best. In the past, FEMA has asked to see north, south, east, and west photos of every project site location. So be prepared that when we're putting together the application, if your project includes something where that project site is really important, you might need to go out, drive to where you want to put the project, and just take a picture. Take a couple of pictures, take several pictures, so you've got them all on your, your little sheet there. You can drop them into a Word document so that you don't have to have all these separate files. You just have like a 30-page Word document with all of your clearly labeled photos. But showing and telling where you are, that's going to be great as well. Who, what, when, where, why. Narrative. I cannot stress enough how important it is to communicate what is important to you. Like, you would not be doing this project if it wasn't necessary. No one is going to want to put up with all this paperwork and putting it all together if it wasn't a really good idea and it wasn't for a really good reason. Explain that reason. Clearly communicate what drives you to complete this project, what harm you're trying to avoid, why this location, why this project, why now? Maybe there's some funding that you need to leverage or utilize. Maybe now you have the right staff in place that can actually execute this subgrant agreement. Why not a different project? Whatever the why is, you want to put that. It doesn't have to be super long. It can be a couple of sentences here, but we do want to connect your reasoning and give that to FEMA as a compelling reason for why they should give you money. Convince them. All right. How? Who, what, when, where, why, how? Storytelling basics. Okay, so here's the thing about this. FEMA loves to know how the sausage is being made. And for many of us, this is like the piece that feels the most boring. Administrative work, background work, all of this is just sort of, well, yeah, we all work professional jobs. Why wouldn't we be able to function in this under the subgrant? But you want to be able to convince FEMA that you know what you're doing with their funding, and you will be able to complete both the project and the compliance piece. So if you are the one person with all the hats, you want to say, I'm the one person with all the hats. I know what I'm doing. I am going to be the project manager. I'm going to oversee and make sure that all of the contractors that we hire are in compliance. I am going to coordinate with FEMA and the state and make sure that I know what I'm doing as far as the subgrant goes. I'm going to review invoices. I am going to retain all the paperwork required. Like, it lives and dies with me. If you are one person in a team of many, you also want to be able to describe that, particularly like if you get into one of these subgrants where it's the city and the county and the flood control district and another quasi-governmental entity. Everybody's role needs to be identified. who's going to take the lead? Who's going to call, like, how often are you guys going to meet? Who's giving money to who and who is like authorizing that? You might need a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding if everybody's trying to play together. What happens if somebody leaves? You know, you want to have it all documented out of like who is committing to do what here. That how is an important piece too. De-obligation is the dirty word of FEMA grant funding. You do not want to get down to the end of the grant program and realize that something went horribly wrong and you don't get your reimbursement. That is the worst case scenario. So here at the application site, you want to be able to outline how you're going to be successful in this grant program so that you can get awarded. As a note, under the BRIC qualitative review criteria, FEMA wants to know this so bad, they give you 15 extra points if you do a good job of telling them how you're going to accomplish this project. It's not that, you know, there's not going to be this level of like point awards for all of the different grant programs, but it is one of those big key factors in convincing FEMA that you can get across the finish line and complete the project as necessary. The last here are the important details. Each different application that you submit is going to be wildly different. If you're submitting an application for 2 different projects on 2 different sites, even if they're the same project type, there might be nuances there. You might need a different proof of ownership over here, or you might need a different kind of map over here. It's really hard to get a one-size-fits-all application template going because each of these stories that you're telling is going to be different. Like I said, when you use a piece of data, you want to make sure you're backing up that information. So make sure your supplemental documentation, your backup documentation is all together, and that you're not forgetting any important details. Was there a community input session? Did you get really bugged by a couple of residential people who were really annoyed at what was going on and they really wanted to get this project done? So you've got some big community interest. Do you have somebody took office and they have a priority, and so now there is political will to accomplish something? Do you have funding available for one reason or another? Did you have a really bad event, an impact that you now know how vulnerable XYZ is and you really would like to protect them? Whatever it is that makes your story unique, you would like to convey that and provide the backup documentation for it. Are there any questions so far on the who, what, when, where, why, or how? I do see there's a chat. I just want to check that really quick before I move on to the next content. Okay. Happy to have participation however you're able to join. Anybody have any questions before we move on? Okay. So that's the application material. That's your narrative. Those are your bones. That's all the piece of that scope of work that we were talking about that touches on some of the other pieces as well. Cost estimate and budget. For anyone who attended last week's session, we went into some more of the match and some of those nuances about the funding and things. I'd like to talk a little bit about when you put that cost estimate together, what does that look like when you connect it with the rest of your application? Again, we're tying everything together. You do not want to say that this is going to be $110,000 over here and $108.50 over here and $108.73.26 over here. Everything needs to be clean and concise all the way around, no dangling numbers anywhere. The project budget cost estimate establishes what it costs to support the scope of work. So like I was saying with that last week's slide, it's not just the construction, it's not just the project management, it's not just the studies that you need to do, but it's all of it together and the staff time and da-da-da-da-da-da. All the pieces come together to create that budget, that cost estimate, and they need to be connected to each other. So if you have a quote for $250,000 and you say your budget is $150,000, there's a discrepancy between those two items. If your detailed budget breaks it down at $487,000.96, but your cost estimate rounds it up to $500,000, you need to explain. Not that you might have items that have just slightly different numbers, but you need to explain how you rolled it up, where you kind of massaged the figures so that you're not saying that it's two different costs in two different places. Everything needs to be consistent. Up there at the top, you can see that SF424C or SF424A. I have another slide later on about the federal forms. Those are two of the federal forms, one for construction, C, and one for non-construction, A, that break down your detailed budget into federally established line items. The reason why I'm calling this out is because when we get there, those federally established line items make it real nice and clean for tracking purposes. At the end of the day, you're going to have to show FEMA that you asked for money in these line items, you spent money in these line items, and this is the roll up of all the money you spent in these line items. Definitely look at that SF424C or 424A layout to see if those will work for you, those line items work for you for tracking purposes, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're tracking the number of screws or the number of acre feet of riprap that you used or something. So definitely just consider looking at those. Detailed budget, budget narrative, quotes, opinion of probable costs, like we talked about last time, and your federal forms all come together to make this financial picture. Important details. Consistency is key. Again, don't leave pennies on the floor. I have spent more of my life than I want to admit to, and cried more professional tears than I want to admit either, hunting pennies for FEMA. They absolutely will spend days making you track down paperwork to hunt pennies. So just try and keep it as nice and clean as possible and consistent as possible across the board. Include the costs associated with every aspect of your scope of work. I know I'm a broken record at this point on this point, but there's a reason for that. There is no penalty for not utilizing the full award. Keep in mind that, particularly if you're going out to the national programs, but even under these HMGP post-fire, there's a lot of, the mitigation grants are not designed to be fast. They are designed to be thorough, thoughtful, and before you have a bad day. So the idea is that you are going to be thorough and thoughtful in preparing your application and project how much this is going to cost when you actually have the money and are ready to do this work in 3 years. Depending on, we can, individual projects, individual timelines, but understanding that they are not designed to be quick grants. They are designed to function over a course of a 36-month period of performance. And depending on that award timeline, like for BRIC and FMA, you might not be done with this subgrant for 5 years. So when you are projecting how much this is going to cost, consider the amount that it's going to cost, not to purchase that thing today, but what it's going to cost to purchase that thing in 2 or 3 years when you're in the middle of your period of performance. So if you budget high and you don't use it all, you still get 75-25. You still get 75% of what you actually spent. If you budget low, and again, this is particular for the national programs, there is no increasing the federal cost share, and sometimes under the HMGP post-fire too. So if you ask for $100 and it ends up costing you $150, again, bad the mental math, but if you ask for $100, you're going to get $75 back on that 100. If you ask for 150, you're going to get $75 back on that, and you are going to have to, out of your own pockets, cover the discrepancy. So if you have the opportunity to round up or round down, round up so that you can get awarded the full amount, utilize what you need. And if you have to give back some because you didn't use it, that's fine, no penalty. Backup documentation is always going to be required. So if you say that you have an average rate of $100 an hour or $30 an hour or whatever that is, you're going to have to explain how you got that figure. Sometimes there might be math to explain that figure. Sometimes you can just say in consultation with industry experts. That's how we picked the number. But you're going to need to back up that document, back up your figures that you're utilizing. From the HMA guidance, the new guidance that just came out, the recommended total contingency range is 1% to 5%. So if you have your whole budget laid out in front of you and you are including a contingency line item, a separate line item that you're going to access only if you need it, and this is not the rounding up because, you know, let's say your construction opinion of probable cost is like $497,000. And you're going to roll that up to 500, and you've narratively explained that you're budgeting high because you don't want to be held to today's rates and you want 500,000 for that construction piece. That would be just your construction line item being 500,000. But if you're having a separate standalone contingency line item, it cannot exceed 1% to 5% of your total project cost. That would be ineligible. Did I hear anybody? Is there a question? Okay. And then 7% for the National Historic Preservation Act. If you have a property that is a historical property, they do understand that there can be sometimes some hidden things. For anyone who has done a renovation project or construction of partial reconstruction, are things hidden under those floorboards? It can get messy. Any questions on the cost component or anything here before I move on to the next slide? Oh, and I've realized that I've left a little oopsie on here. So these are the SF standard form family of forms. These are all located on grants.gov. So if you just even Google type grants.gov, you can access these forms. As a hint, please use Google Chrome to access these forms. For some reason, if you try to access them using any other web browser, it typically will give me at least an error message, and Google Chrome seems to be the only one that can actually get through to download the forms. So if you get all the way there and you go to try and download them and you get an error message, just check your web browser, see if you're using Google Chrome. Microsoft Edge is not going to cut it. So Google Chrome. These are a family of forms utilized across the federal government for a variety of different grant programs. They are not specific to hazard mitigation assistance, and they are not specific to FEMA. The first one that's up there, this was my boo-boo. I left that on there, but we have confirmed with the state that they are not requiring individual SF424s for each project. So you can just kind of mentally wipe that off. You will be required for every project that you submit to submit the disclosure of lobbying activities, the SFLLL. And that is if your entity is engaged in soliciting the federal government for funding or whatever, or lobbying activities, you'll need to disclose that. If not, you can just put like NA and sign it from your legal and fiscal authorized signature authority for your entity needs to sign that says your entity is not engaged in that activities, not applicable, or that you are, and who is doing that on your behalf. So this is sometimes can be kind of confusing. When I say construction projects, I mean you touch the ground. If you are disturbing the trees or the bushes or the dirt, or you're putting a piece of equipment like a generator out there, if you are like messing with the actual physical world, you're going to go for that construction type forms. And if you are doing more things like outreach and education, code projects, planning, anything along those lines, it's more about like data and computers, anything that you're going to do digitally or interpersonally, that's going to be your non-construction projects. So this is where like you might not immediately think that like wildfire thinning, construction, generator, construction, those kinds of things. So SF424A and B for non-construction projects. The A is that form that I mentioned before that breaks out your budget. And the B is a single sheet of paper that needs to be all these, if they have a signature on them, they need to be signed by your signature authority, your authorized representative. But that single sheet of paper, the SF424B, has a variety of different assurances that says, essentially, I will not break the law. that you will be in compliance with the EHP considerations. And if you find things like pottery or a dead body or something, you're going to tell the feds. So it's a single page. I will not break the law. For construction projects, it's the same thing. The SF424C has the budgetary considerations, and the SF424D is, again, a single sheet of paper that says, I will not break the law. If you would like to go look at those documents, please do. A and C do not need signatures, but B and D do, and so does the SFLLL. Any questions on the federal forms? Benefit cost analysis, BCA. What is this? The federal government, when they are making decisions about where to spend money, want to ensure that the money that they spend is spent well. So a cost-effective project is one that if we spend the dollar today, will save us more than $1 in the future. There was a big research, for many, many years, they would say that every $1 spent on mitigation saves $4 in the disaster. So essentially, if you spend $1 doing wildfire thinning today, you're going to avoid $4 of losses tomorrow. And then they did their big research study, and the Pew Research Center put out a new article, I want to say 2018, that changed that national average to 6. So $1 spent today saves you 6 in the long run. And depending on the hazard, like certain types like earthquake or whatever, that dollar figure gets up to $1 spent today on mitigation saves you 11 in the future. So this benefit cost analysis, this BCA tool, which is a downloadable plugin to Excel, is kind of a little bit complicated if you've never done some of the more advanced stuff in Excel, but they have very clear guide documents for how you can download the BCA and how to run it yourself. It compares, so that full picture of what we talked about the scope of work, everything in the scope of work is all together in this project. Your full total project cost is the cost, and the benefits are the long-term costs that you're avoiding. And it needs to equal at least 1. So essentially, for this example, if your total project cost is $100,000, and the benefits once calculated are $200,000, your BCR, your benefit cost ratio, is a 2. You're saving those 2-to-1 value. So as long as your costs spent today compared to the costs that you're avoiding is a 1 or greater, your project is cost beneficial. So when I say benefits, what does that mean? They can include prevented damages. So like I said, you spend $1 today on wildfire thinning activities or defensible space, whatever. They're going to calculate how much costs you have avoided compared to that $1 that you're spending. Your utility continuity, if you're keeping power on today, how long are you saving from your power going down in the future? Transportation continuity. So if you're protecting a roadway, you're preserving the ability to use that roadway as opposed to having to find the next easiest route around, the miles spent, the time spent getting around that inconvenience. Lives and injuries prevented. So if you have a documentation from the past, like I said, that what happened, that bad thing that happened, if you have documented lives lost or injuries that have happened in the past from your bad day, you can show that and say, if we do this, we're going to avoid that happening again. They give you a benefit to that as well. Environmental and economic benefits. If you're avoiding losing your natural habitat, if you're avoiding losing impact to your businesses, all of those things go into the benefit side of your benefit cost analysis. Depending on your project type, depending on what you're trying to do, the BCA tool will lead you down different paths. There's 2 different tables in the BCA. The first one sort of outlines what it is you're going to do, and then depending on what you pick on page 1, page 2 will change and prompt you to input different information. If all of that sounds complicated, it's because it is. The BCA in and of itself can be an entire career of benefit cost analysis. So what are pre-calculated benefits? This is your get out of jail free card. I cannot stress enough how great pre-calculated benefits are if they're applicable to your project. This first concept is that if your project costs less than 1 million, we can, instead of doing a full BCA, provide a narrative that includes the qualitative, the like quality, and the quantitative, the actual like numbers and figures and bean counting data. So quality and bean counting data, demonstrating that the benefits and cost effectiveness of the project exist. So narrative. It's the telling a good story, telling a convincing story, telling an effective story that paints the picture for FEMA. So that is an option that now exists. It is new to the new guidance, so it's a little bit untested. We're still trying to like walk through that process with FEMA, but it is an option that exists. And if you have a different methodology from the FEMA BCA, you can utilize that as well. When you deviate from what FEMA has specified, if any of you have played around the BCA tool, there's a little like toggle where you can either use a rate or something that FEMA has pre-calculated, or you can use something different. If you decide to part ways with FEMA and use a different document, different number, different rate, you need to be able to back up why. So FEMA accepts their own sort of figures, but if you want to use something different, you got to be convincing that should be allowable. So utilizing pre-calculated benefits is essentially including in your application that your project is no greater than the dollar figure that they have pre-calculated as the benefits. The kinds of activities that are included in pre-calculated benefits, again, here's this link. There are post-wildfire activities that are identified with pre-calculated benefits, acquisitions, elevations, some safe rooms, and some generators. I took the liberty, knowing the interest right now, because we are considering we have an open HMGP post-fire grant program available, of taking a quick snapshot of what those post-wildfire project types are and what the pre-calculated benefits are. So, for example, if you were to do that very first one, a soil stabilization project that includes reseeding ground cover with quick growing or native species, as long as the cost to do that project is less than $38,113, what your cost is that per acre, you don't have to do anything else. If you do the math on this and it comes out that your project is an average of $20,000 per acre to do that project, you say we're using pre-calculated benefits and you're off to the races. So if you have a project that meets pre-calculated benefits, it can save you a lot of time and headache. Any questions on BCA before I move on to this last piece here? Environmental and historic preservation. Again, a deep, dark hole that we are going to just survey the top of and not dive too deep into. I just want to give you some context for what it means when we say EHP components. So the environmental and historic preservation components is essentially saying that you recognize there are federal regulations and that you are in compliance with those federal regulations. The topics that they cover: physical, biological, water, cultural, and social. Just as a snapshot, not to overwhelm anyone, but just to give you a tiny picture of what this means. The items that are in bold are the legal processes that are referenced by the EHP compliance, and the little questions that are after it is one example of some of the things that are included when they ask, are you in compliance with this program? So you can see here, NEPA, National Historic Preservation Act, will ask you things like, are you going to disturb the ground? If your project says no, because we're doing a plan or something, then you can move on. If your project is yes, because we're going to be putting a generator pad down, then you need to say what you're doing. We're going to put a generator pad down. It's going to be here. We're going to talk about how we're disturbing the ground and what that's going to include. Same thing for each one of these. So this is just a little snapshot to give you a taste of what EHP includes, of the kinds of laws that you need to be in compliance with, and the kinds of questions that they're going to ask you. Any questions about what EHP compliance looks like? Okay. Put it together. What have you got? Bibbidi bobbidi boo, an application. So I'm going to come back to this and say the importance of telling a compelling narrative. I told you guys I was cheesy. So the narrative ties together all of your bones. It keeps it all in a nice package so that every reviewer, from the state's contractors, me and Matt and Aaron, to FEMA and FEMA's contractors and FEMA's engineers and FEMA's BACA specialists and their EHP specialists, the narrative ties it all together so everybody is on the same page, everyone understands your story, and everyone has the information that they need to feel good about awarding you money. You're convincing them to give you money. As a little reminder, this sentence paragraph sandwich here, where they talk through the sandwich. Some of you may have recognized this from elementary school. I was not a paragraph sandwich elementary school child, but for anyone who is, the idea is you introduce a concept, your topic sentence, please give me money for this thing. Supporting sentence, it's a good idea because. The rest of your information, it would be great if you gave us money for this, your conclusion sentence. You want to tell your story in a way that makes it easy and accessible to your reviewers so that you can convince them of your need for money and need for funding. So if you decide that you would like to go down this wonderful journey with all of us and submit an application for hazard mitigation assistance funding, we are talking here in these sessions about two different pots of money. There's the BRIC and FMA money, which again has not opened up yet, but we're hoping that it will be soon. It's a little bit delayed. And then there's the HMGP post-fire money, which is open now and has a definitive application deadline of February 7th. And you need to have a complete finalized application by that date. Now is the time. So the BRIC and FMA, if you're going to apply there, they have in this FEMA Grants Outcomes, FEMA Go, this website, there is a portal where they have all of the application material laid out, where you're going to upload all of your bones. Remember, your bones are the same no matter what. Those bones are all going to get inputted into that tool, the FEMA Go application tool, and it's not open yet. So when you go there, this is what you're going to see, but we're not doing it yet, but you can still work on your bones. If you are instead going for hazard mitigation grant program post-fire right now is the time. This is a snip of the state's website. And look, wonderful resources abound. Your notice of interest says, hey, I would like some money. And the applications for project construction and planning, non-construction applications are on here. As a little hint, some projects can be non-construction as well. So that can be complicated. Ask the question if you're not sure which one to fill out. But both of those applications, if you're filling out the HMGP post-fire, are what you're going to need to look at and what you're going to need to start working on before February 7th to get your funding. So both of those are on the website. But look what else lives on the Nevada website. OMG, ooh, ah, ah. Cost estimate spreadsheet. Yay, templates and tools. That is a wonderful thing to reference if you're trying to build your budget. A maintenance letter template, which we haven't necessarily talked about here. It's one of the things that may or may not be required, but it's there, another tool for you to use. The HMGP sub-application match letter template. Again, another wonderful tool that can help you complete that checkbox on the application. The subrecipient management costs. Remember, if this is your world, your total project, it's the thing that sits on top on the outside to help you manage the free federal, 100% federal dollars to help you manage. There's a little form for that. And at the very bottom, the hazard mitigation assistance grants environmental and historic preservation information checklist. That is going to be a required component of your application. If you are doing a project, please click on that one, get a little familiar. It's one of those deep, dark holes, but here is a nice, friendly, easily accessible tool to help you navigate that particular process. Okay, I'm going to pause here for just a second, and I will invite anyone here to come back and ask any questions. I'm happy to scroll back through any of the decks if anybody wants to revisit a topic, but I'm going to give it a minute in case anybody has any questions. Chat or just come online. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Hey, I just had a quick question. So the contingency that's been mentioned in the application, it says that the contingency is not allowed. So how would I know that the contingency is allowed? Because the one I just submitted, that would have been of huge benefit to have incorporated even 1% contingency, and I read it in the section that says that it's not allowable. So how do I know when it is and when it isn't, please?
Yes, and this can be one of those like quick, depending on what is in the HMA guidance, there are some project types that don't allow it. So there, like I said, okay. Contingency itself is one of those things that FEMA acknowledges is a thing that people might need, but they really don't want to give it to you. So they're going to fight you on it. In all circumstances, it's better to see if we can all find a different path so we don't make FEMA angry. And in that circumstance, it might be one where we pad each of the individual line items. So depending on your specific project type, do you, just off the top of your head, can you give us like a quick little, what does the scope include? What's the project?
I think I mentioned it in the first one. I put in for some signage specific to Avalanche, and that contingency would have paid for the change in materials since application time, and those quotes I guarantee will be higher, and I only factored in a little bit and not a lot of it, and I'm worried.
So yeah, in that circumstance, so we might want to have a conversation because I'd like to, maybe find out some more about that project and see if there's a way we can do a budget change. We'll just talk it through. Let's just talk it through. So maybe we can get an email or a call going together and see if we can find some solutions. Now, where there's a will, there's a way. But as far as the beginning of the application period, that adding a little bit is going to be maybe adding a little bit more to try and make sure, because as we have all experienced over the last 5 years, none of us were prepared for the exponential growth of certain materials and costs. And so there is just an understandable need to kind of protect ourselves from who knows where things are going to go. So we're going to work. Let's talk on that. Definitely. Any other questions? Contingency or otherwise? I'm going to check the chat here because I do see, just want to double check. Okay. Yes, we definitely want to make all of this material available to you all. Get through there. Okay. These, again, are our contact information. If you would like to speak to myself, Chelsea Morganti, Matt, who has also been a presenter here, Matt Arsenault, or Aaron Buchanan, who is our supervisor above all of us, all of our emails and phone numbers are available here to you. You can take a quick snapshot. I'm going to linger here for a minute in case you want to send us an email. We are available to you at the wonderful generosity of the state to provide technical assistance and to help facilitate, prepare, ask questions, anything that you guys need. We are your support for application development, the guide post through this wonderful storm we're all engaged in. I have a slide on HMA resources, and I'm saving a little bit of time because I'm going to ask you all questions. So prepare. For anyone who is like cleaning your office in the background now, prepare because I'm going to ask a pop quiz in just a moment. As you know, we have these HMA resources. If you'd like to go and check any of these sites, I can also drop them in the chat if you can't access them. but we're happy to direct you towards some places where you can find some additional support. Okay, here is the pop quiz. Next week, I'm going to give a training on BCA basics, the benefit cost analysis. If you would like that training to be tailored toward a project that you are interested in, if you're interested in generators, if you're interested in wildfire thinning, if you're interested in flood mitigation, please now is the time. Pop quiz has been activated. Please drop into the chat the type of project you're considering so I can let you know any nuances, any kind of backup documentation you might need. We could use it as an example, but next week is a presentation on the benefit cost analysis. Again, one of those deep dark holes. And I would like it for it to be applicable to you. I'd like it to be helpful for you. So please help me tailor that BCA training to what you're interested in learning about so that it's applicable and helpful. Yay, flood mitigation and generators, happy to do that. Just said a question, is that flood mitigation like a detention basin? Is it a culvert? Is it a bank stabilization project? Is it acquiring a property? So you're buying someone's home and converting it into open space. Is it, so like we have arroyos here in New Mexico where we will lose 16 feet of banks, you know, that kind of stuff. Emergency shelter upgrades, that's great. And emergency generators, yes, we have portable generators. We also have stationary generators that, depending on the need, channel construction west of the community and then under a highway to a dry lake bed, great. Culverts, great. Channel rechannelization, roadway protection, wonderful. Please, yes, anyone else? Projects that you're interested in, project types, any wildfire people in the house? Okay. All right, those are going to be my marching orders. Please join us next week. We're going to talk through these BCA basics. We're going to talk through how to put that together. I will warn you that in the past, I have likened page 1 as being like super accessible. You can kind of find your way. And then page 2, you need to be an engineer. So I'm just warning you that when you get into that BCA, it does kind of slip down pretty quickly. Wildfire app is almost done. Yay! Wonderful. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to drop the slide. I want to say thank you again to Nevada DEM, to Janelle and Hal for letting us speak with you all on these training sessions. I'm still here if anybody has any questions, but I'm going to drop the slide deck in case anybody would like to chat.
That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Very, very informative. And want to thank everybody for attending today for our session. Hopefully you got some great information out of the presentations. And encourage you all to attend our next session, which will be as Chelsea had mentioned, the BCA Basics. Sounds like a great tools in utilizing and building your applications. So if you have any information that you'd like from our office, please give myself or Janelle a call. We can help you out from our hazard mitigation section. And thank you all again for attending, and we will see you all in the next session unless you have any questions. All right, thank you so much. Everybody have a great day.